It's the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. Hello, Jersey football fans. I'm Dan Long, and on today's episode, I'll be joined by NJ.com football writers Donovan Hugel, Ryan Patty, Kevin Minnick, Mike Kinney, and Joe Zanalis. And on today's episode, we'll recap Don Bosco Prep's overtime win over St. Joe's, while also getting us set for the start of the NJIC playoffs. We'll talk about some big results down in South Jersey, including Washington Township's win over Rancocas Valley. We'll break down St. Joe's Metuchen's big win over Phillipsburg in the Big Central, while also talking about Red Bank Catholic's win over Rumson Fairhaven in the Shore Conference. We'll go over some surprising opportunities here for a couple of teams getting later and later in the regular season, and also we'll listen to Kevin's interview with Mike Schatzman, the head coach of Washington Township. Our writers will have their weekly Top 20 roundtable discussion before getting us set for some of the biggest games of Week 7. And a reminder that we want you to be part of the Jersey Blitz going forward, so if you want to ask a question for the guys to discuss, please send your messages on X to HSSportsNJ with hashtag Jersey Blitz. So starting things off, we'll welcome Donovan Hugel onto the show. And Don Bosco Prep once again passed another big test this season, this time in overtime on the road against a very spirited St. Joe's team in Montvale.
Yeah, Dan, they're in the college football playoff.
They got it.
Yeah, they're in. But yeah, I'm sure that everybody on Don Bosco's end let out a big sigh of relief after John Devers' walk-off field goal in that game. It's pretty safe to say that that Bergen game was tough, but this Joe's game, I think, was the hardest win of the season for Don Bosco by far. I mean, I think so. The Joe's defense made life extremely, extremely difficult for Bosco. Bosco gained just 125 yards of offense. They weren't ever really able to get into a rhythm, and they struggled to string together long drives. They only really had the one true scoring drive at the start of the second quarter. And we alluded to it in last week's episode that Joe's has a ton of talented dudes on that defense, a ton of talented dudes in the secondary, namely Jonathan Gillette and KJ McLean. And if those two specifically played up to their full potential, Bosco is going to have to beat Joe's on the ground. And Bosco's run game this season, like I said last week, has been good, but it hasn't been otherworldly. And that run game, even though, I'll talk about it in a second, like they got it together at the end, but Kasai Thomas, who is the more athletic kind of running in space, pass catching running back. He struggled in this game. He wasn't really able to run in space and get free around Joe's, several talented defenders. So when it came down to it, Dante DeLuca was the man for the job. He's a little bit beefier than Thomas. He's a little bit older, more experienced, and he just had an easier time running behind that talented offensive line that's been so good this year. Up the middle for gains of 3, 4, 5 yards. And in overtime, he was great. They ran 6 plays in overtime. He ran the ball all 6 times. And while he wasn't able to get a first down on their 3rd and 5, I believe it was 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6, he did get to a 4th and 3, which then set up that chip shot for Dever at the end. So yeah, I mean, when it came down to it, Bosco did enough to win. They found another way to win. There's going to be things that they're going to want to, go back and fix, clearly. Ultimately, they made fewer mistakes than Joe's. But don't get me wrong, and Ryan, I don't know how you feel about this, but there was a moment in time, specifically in that fourth quarter, before Amori McNeil's interception, where this felt like Joe's game to lose, but then mistakes just kind of caught up to them. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately this was a game that Joe's left on the table, and you mentioned the fourth quarter being the time where you think you saw momentum going in St. Joe's favor. I saw it in the second quarter after that Brady Schuss touchdown, but like I said, this is a win that St. Joe's kind of left on the table here. And there were some execution things that I think are fixable. You had 3 field goal operations go sideways, 2 misses, and then the high snap 10 regulation, which it would have been tough anyway. Those conditions, it was windy, it was rainy. Anything over 40 yards would have been incredible. And like I said, that touchdown to make it 14-7 by Brady Schuss, amazing play call from Gary Nova. He was scot-free up the left sideline. He was uncovered. It was a great play call. But that was all for nothing because of a kick return by Isaiah Alvarez on the ensuing kickoff that retied the game. You had the great play, like Donovan mentioned, from Amari McNeil on the throw to Bailey in the end zone, and you tip your cap there. But, that goes in the book as a turnover and another mistake. And a couple key third downs, they weren't converted either. But, with all that, and you know, you guys have heard me speak about the St. Joe's coaching staff all the time. They're one of my favorite coaching staff. So many championship winning coaches there. They coached my brother. Deep coaching staff, like a dozen really good coaches. But there's got to be a lot of moments in this game where they probably would like a mulligan, on a few moments. A couple plays went backwards where they really couldn't afford a negative yardage play. They left a timeout in their pocket before the half. They kicked the field goal on third down, and I thought they could have got a little closer for the kicker or took a shot to the end zone. But the big thing, and I talked to multiple Bosco coaches after the game because they had it sniffed out the whole time. Lamar Best is clearly injured to where he can't throw the ball. He's got an injury to his throwing shoulder. He threw one pass in warm-ups if you were there. I was there an hour and a half before the game. He threw one pass in warm-ups and he just lobbed it. And he was moving his shoulder like the whole time, just rotating his shoulder. And he's really injured. And I could see this injury affecting him the rest of the way. And he was out there for a couple plays. And Bosco and pretty much everyone in Montvale knew that St. Joe's was running a ball on those plays. And essentially all those plays either went nowhere or backwards. One was a flea flicker, lost like 12 yards. So a really big game for St. Joe's that ends in a really stomach-turning loss. But, I mean, here's the thing. It wasn't your greatest day, and you lost in overtime to the number one team in the state, and you're this close to being number one in the rankings potentially, like the best team in the state. You're this close. But in a game like this, it's about playing it safe. The weather wasn't great. You just got to do the simple things and not make the big mistakes. And I think Coach Sabella and his team were the ones that ultimately accomplished that better.
Ryan, Patty, you now have a St. Joe's team that has 2 losses by combined 4 points this season. They have a game upcoming next weekend in Oradell against Bergen Catholic. If they were to lose to that Bergen Catholic team, in all likelihood, you might be seeing St. Joe's as a 4 seed in this bracket, having a matchup with Don Bosco Prep in Ramsey in a potential semifinal if things hold the way they do, and maybe you have a Bergen versus St. Peter's matchup on the other side of the bracket. What are we to see about this St. Joe's team? It's great seeing Nate Bailey back on the field, but can they win a state championship without Lamar Best being anywhere close to what he's been in the past in his career?
Well, I'll tell you what, I was very impressed with Mason Geist. That interception, it was a great play by Amari McNeil. I know it goes in the book as an interception. I thought Mason Geist played as good of a game. He played as good of a game as I've seen him play, in his time as starter. A couple spot starts last year, of course, when Best got hurt. But he played very well. And you mentioned Nate Bailey. I mean, this is a different St. Joe's team when he's on the field. He was absolutely outstanding. Catches in traffic. He picked up a couple big third downs at a Wildcat. Like he is so phenomenal. Nate Bailey's outstanding, and you really saw just how much he can have an impact on a game. He was taking over that game before that interception. And you mentioned what could happen if St. Joe's loses to Bergen Catholic after the Pope John game. First, they're going to be focused on Pope John. They want to get through that game. But if they lose to Bergen Catholic, Luis Torres and I, our former reporter Luis Torres, we were talking, and if St. Joe's Met runs the table, could St. Joe's Montvale be the 5 seed? Could the committee do that where, if St. Joe's Met is unbeaten, could they move St. Joe's to the 5 line and all of a sudden St. Joe's has to go on the road in a quarterfinal? I do favor St. Joe's Montvale in that game if they were to play St. Joe's Met. But I ultimately think with how good the top 4 teams are in the section this year, Bosco, Bergen, St. Peter's, St. Joe's, those top 4, you're playing a tough semifinal no matter what. But it's going to be interesting to see how non-public A shakes out seeding-wise, what the matchups will be if Joe's does lose to Bergen. But also, what if Joe's wins that game? Like, where's Bergen all of a sudden? You know what I mean? So it's going to be fascinating to see how that shakes out.
And Don Bosco, again, they passed another test. They'll get another big shot later on in the season against St. Peter's Prep, but they're finding a way to win these games where in the last couple of seasons, they've fallen short in the regular season or the postseason. That's got to be a great buildup for Coach Sabella's side.
Yeah, and I think one thing to note is the performance of the offense was not great, but again, it was something like Carson Chang threw 1 interception, which no one's gonna like that, but the mistakes were few and far between. Like they weren't really there for Bosco. It was just that Joe's defense played really well, and they couldn't get going. And I think when teams like these two know each other so well, it's going to be really hard to outskill the other team. It's just going to be kind of about running through the tackles, running up the middle, which Bosco did really well at the end. And then the special teams, they just converted better than Joe's at the end. But yeah, like you said, they found another way to win. The turnovers are limited. They're healthy. Matt Acapinti went down with an injury earlier in the game, but then came back and he played great. That D line was such a difference in overtime. They're just getting really good performances from their best players in the biggest game so far, and I think it speaks volumes that they're doing it against such a gauntlet of a schedule. Like it wasn't, they're not playing Bergen and then Joe's and then Peter's like 4 weeks in between. You know what I mean? Like it's pretty much all really tight together, all a like really compound schedule. And they're just performing really well in these games, and it's really impressive to see. It's going to be really hard for them to do this. It was always going to be really hard for them to beat everybody like they did beat DePaul. But they found another way to win. That's really all that they're going to care about, and they're just going to move on to Peters.
So that's a look at the big matchup that happened in the Super Football Conference. And now shifting gears, still staying up north, we take a look at the NJIC, whose playoffs are going to be beginning this weekend. And Donovan, taking a look at the first semifinal that you want to break down, Rutherford and Wood-Ridge, with a chance to get to that NJIC final that we'll be broadcasting on NJ.com next weekend. What do you see with that matchup of Rutherford and Wood-Ridge in the first semifinal in the NJIC?
Yeah, I mean, Rutherford, like, really not much to complain about. Like 6-0, heading into the semis with a full head of steam. They just crushed, they crushed Creskill, Emerson Borough 2 weeks ago, and then they crushed North Arlington this week. I believe those scores were, low 30s to 6. And that was coming off of just a 3-0 win over Glen Rock. So clearly there wasn't really a hangover from that Glen Rock game of limited offense. They were able to get their business back together. And I think one of the biggest stories of Rutherford's season so far has been how well this sophomore class has played. And, talking to Coach Steve Dunn at NJIC Media Day, before the season started, he said he was cautiously optimistic about this team, just given how young they were. But John Joya has shined at running back so far, taking over for his older brother who graduated last year. And then you've got two receivers, Quinn Weber, who Dunn is extremely high on, and then Will Holman, each have 200 yards receiving, should only get better with time. All those guys, along with Jojo Marullo, who leads the team in interceptions with 4, are major two-way contributors. And then, we can't forget about quarterback Miles Balchin, who over 1,000 passing yards, Dimitri Pascas, and then AJ Nunziato are all still juniors. So this team is young, but they are performing really, really, really well against the schedule, better than I think Dunn would have thought they would. And so, I mean, I think they're feeling pretty confident heading into this semifinal. I'm taking them as the favorite in this game, to be completely honest. I think when comparing their season with Wood-Ridge, I think we're looking at this Wood-Ridge team a little bit differently this week compared to heading into last week. I was at their game against Bogota on Friday night, and Bogota's a quality team this year. Like they are not they've been preaching all year. They're not the Bogota of past. They have really good players on this team. And Bogota played that game against Wood-Ridge like they were fighting for a playoff spot. And head coach Andrew Carbone of Wood-Ridge was telling that to his players on the sideline. And Wood-Ridge just didn't really come out in that game with a ton of juice. And they hadn't played a ton of quality competition all year, but the wins over quality opponents like St. Mary's and Park Ridge were good results because it kind of showed that Wood-Ridge wasn't really a fluke and they weren't just beating up on lesser teams. They were able to beat quality opponents within the NJIC. And then Bogota came in and kind of just spoiled Wood-Ridge's undefeated run. And now I think Wood-Ridge is kind of in a bind. Like to me, that was kind of the worst time to lose a regular season game right before the NJIC playoffs start. And to lose in the fashion that they did as well, like they were down 29-6 at halftime and they gave up a punt return touchdown. There was a pick six, all within the span of basically 2.5 minutes before halftime. And then they didn't give up any points in the second half, but they weren't really able to rally at all, and they lost 29-18. So, I think they're kind of going to have to get their act together a little bit on the field and play mistake-free football. Rutherford is such a well-respected opponent, and while this is a younger, more mature team, under Dunn this year, Dunn is such an experienced coach that he's going to have these kids ready to play in this semifinal game. So I think Wood-Ridge is definitely going to have to come out with a little bit of fire And we'll see what happens on Friday night, but I'm taking Rutherford in that matchup.
And Ryan, in the other NJIC playoff semifinal, you're having a rematch of a game that we broadcast way back when in the early vestiges of the season, Butler taking on Becton.
Yeah, Butler's undefeated, Dan. They've handled business all season, and it wasn't always as clean and crisp as they would have liked, but they're unbeaten. And Becton started 0-2, like you mentioned. They lose to Butler in that week one game, and they also lost in week 0 to unbeaten Hoboken. So both their losses are to unbeaten teams, and they've rattled off 5 straight wins. Eli Davis, the quarterback for Becton, he's playing some great football. And you look at Lucas Frank, one of the better receivers in the conference. He's been pretty reliable for him. Malachi Johnson, he's one of the better underclassmen statistically in the state. I'm talking statewide. He's been really solid. And then they have a very sound defense. They're led by 2 really good tacklers, Pat Lynch and Everett Bell. They've won 2 close 1-point games in consecutive weeks here. One to Lyndhurst, who I probably pegged as the division winner there. And then you had the game against Garfield to officially clinch the division last week and avoid all tiebreakers, because tiebreakers in the NJIC, it's happened a couple years now, and they could get pretty crazy with the power points. And then least points against is the next tiebreaker. We've had some power points tiebreakers have to go to least points against, but Butler, they've won a couple in a row here, some pretty impressive wins. They beat Hasbrook Heights, a team that just entered our Group 1 rankings. It was kind of a shootout there. And then they beat New Milford, who a few weeks ago, they got maybe the conference's best running back in Kobe St. Hilaire. He made a season debut, the junior. He had to sit a couple days to start the season due to the transfer rules, but he's back now, and he's a tough guy to stop, and Butler did so. But in this Becton Butler game on Friday, it's going to take a defensive masterpiece here for Becton, like a 15-14 type of win, 14-13, kind of like the Lyndhurst game you called last year in week 0. It's going to take that type of win for Becton here, where you're controlling the clock and just bottling up Butler, because Butler's really good offensively. David Smith, he's the sectional championship winning quarterback, the senior quarterback. He's got 21 touchdowns this year, 12 passing, 9 rushing. So it's going to be tough to bottle him up. You got to kind of make him look human, maybe turn him over a little bit. And it's going to start with defense here for Becton to win this game.
So that'll be interesting to watch again. Those two semifinals are going to set up then the NJIC final, which we will be broadcasting for all fans to enjoy next weekend. We'll find out where that game is going to be based on the results of this weekend. So as we head from the north down now to the south, and in South Jersey, we bring on Kevin Minnick. And Kevin, pretty much everything played out the way that you expected. It was going to be no crazy upsets this time around, but a big, obviously, victory for Washington Township on the road against Rancocas Valley is that headliner of some big-time results in South Jersey last weekend.
Yeah, Dan, South Jersey football last week, kind of, like you said, kind of went as planned. There was not really anything that was really surprising at all. But the big game, I think, obviously, was a game that people have been looking forward to for a couple of weeks, with Washington Township going to RV. RV came into the game with 2 straight losses, kind of took a little bit of the luster off the game, no longer in the top 20. But Savian Adams came back for RV, and everybody kind of thought, okay, well, maybe this game will be, has the potential to be pretty close. And, after both teams took their first possession, Township scores, RV hits a field goal, and, from that point on, Township just basically really dominated the game. 38-17 in what was probably the most complete game by a team I've seen all season in all aspects. They did a fantastic job offensively. They spread the ball around. Colin Beeler, running back, had 2 touchdowns, and they had a couple other scores. Got a defensive touchdown from Parker Reese, and they were well on their way. So, that was a game that early in the season, everybody had been looking at as kind of being the game for Washington Township, because to that point, maybe the schedule wasn't as strong as it could have been, or maybe people expected it to be. But they came in and they just put their foot down, and they never took it off. So, I was very impressed with what Washington Township did in that game.
A team that's really starting to pick up steam is Williamstown. Talk a bit about them and how they're starting to peak at the right time this season.
Yeah, they're an interesting team in that in their first 5 games, they were 1-4, and that one win was against Chichester, a school in Pennsylvania. So we're kind of thinking, oh, is this going to be the continuation of what's been the last, I guess, 3, 4, 5 years for Williamstown? Because this is a program that not too long ago, I think back 2019, won a South 5 title and won a regional championship. So um, they're turning things around. They've won their last 2. They knocked off RV, which which at that point I think stunned a lot of people. And then last week they took care of business at home, beating a Cherokee squad that's kind of been up and down, but still Cherokee, another traditional South Jersey large school power. You always going to you never really expect Cherokee to be out of a game. So 2 big wins for Williamstown. They've got neighboring Delsea this week. One of Delsey's assistants in Sal Marquez used to be the head coach at Delsea, spent some time last year after retiring calling plays for Delsea. Now he's back in the game, and he's at Williamstown. And after this season is over, he's going to be the head coach at St. Joe in Hamilton. So, you got this all kind of stuff going on with Sal Marquez in this game. But, this is a game Williamstown, I think, they go in as a favorite. I think it's a game that they need to win. Right now, they're sitting at number 8 in the South 5 power rankings. So this get a win here, and then who knows what happens when they face Kingsway, in 2 weeks. But yeah, Williamstown's got themselves some players. Trey Alexander, sophomore running back, has done a really nice job. And they're a young team, so they're only going to get better. So interesting to see how the next couple weeks play out for them.
And also, Mainland saw a record-setting game from a pair of players involved in their last one.
Yeah, Mainland's had its ups and downs, another team, but Nate Cashy goes into the game tied for the career lead in PAT kicks. He gets 4 more to now become the state leader with 200. And then Jake Blum, who's had some injuries this year, hasn't really had an opportunity, I guess, to really fully show what kind of player he is, because he was an all-state pick for us last year, and expectations were pretty high that Mainland could do some damage this year by with Jake Blum leading the way, and it kind of hasn't really happened. But Jake, he becomes the all-time leader at the school in receiving yards, breaking a record that stood for a few years, and then he's also tied the career record for touchdown catches with 18. So I'm pretty certain that record will be all his, possibly this week, or if not in the immediate future. But 2 nice achievements for a couple kids down in Mainland.
So that's a look at what's going on down in South Jersey. And now we shift over to the Big Central Conference and bring on Mike Kinney onto the show. And Mike, I was witness as a broadcaster of the game on Saturday between St. Joe's, Metuchen, and Phillipsburg. Maybe one of the top wins in this Falcons program's history. St. Joe's Metuchen has football for only 15 years compared to Peaburg having football around for their 120th season, but it was St. Joe's that took it to Peaburg, and they had a statement-like performance in the shutout victory and remain undefeated on the season, and now have another big challenge awaiting them this week against St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Dan. This was absolutely a statement win for St. Joe's. Comparably, I think the only other game you would say it matches would be they beat Pope John 2 years ago, the last game of the regular season, and Pope John was number 9 in the top 20 at that point, and Peaburg was 10. But I think this is bigger for a couple reasons. Peaburg certainly has a better reputation overall in the state as far as being a football power, and I think everybody in the state recognizes Peaburg's excellence. But also because it's a conference game now. It's the Big Central Conference. And who's the big daddy of the Big Central Conference? It's been Peaburg sort of the last couple of years. And St. Joe's making that statement now. They got beat badly by Peaburg last year, and they did it the way they did it. There was no mistake to this game. Defensively, they were on par with Peaburg because Peaburg played an excellent defensive game, no question. But they figured things out offensively when needed to in the second half, and I think that was really evidence of a confident team, of a mature team, of a well-coached team, of a team that's ready to state itself as maybe the banner holder of the Big Central Conference overall. I mean, you saw that second half, right? I think it was the difference between a veteran offense run by a senior quarterback and an offense that lost some key people to last year, run by a sophomore with a great deal of talent and a ceiling that is, 15 feet high, but also against a defense that not only is strong and has been all season, but now has the addition of CJ Edwards on one of the edges and Michael Willett at a linebacker, two guys who weren't in the lineup as of 2 weeks ago because they were transfers. So now you add two excellent ball players to a defense that was already tough. I think the difference was Justin Scaramuzzo's experience at quarterback in the second half, as opposed to Dominic Bracco's inexperience at quarterback for Peaburg.
It'll be really interesting to see, based on seeing St. Joe's Metuchen twice this year. A couple of weeks ago, calling St. Thomas Aquinas' game against Paramus Catholic. I would feel that the Falcons, Mike, are going to be the heavy favorites going into that one, but you never know what can happen, and that can shake up seeding in both non-public A and B based on the results of that one.
Yeah, I think so too, Dan. I think there's no doubt about it. Go in. My feeling is St. Joe's is probably a couple touchdowns better, but it's right up the street. St. Thomas has had their number the last couple of years. Of course, it's not nearly the same roster as last year's St. Thomas team. And they also had that loss. It was a very glaring loss to Paramus Catholic. I think when people were in the area, including St. Joe's people, were looking and saying, what are they going to do against Paramus Catholic? It wasn't even a close game. And that was a game that St. Thomas was hoping to reestablish itself as a top 20 team, and it didn't happen. And now St. Joe's is a top 20 team. But these two have a history now. This is neighborhood, bragging rights. There's no question about it. They are about a mile and a half apart from one another. They are the Middlesex County non-public teams, and St. Thomas would like nothing more than to mess up the seeding possibilities for St. Joe's and give them the roughest game possible. So I don't think St. Thomas is by any stretch out of this game, but I do think St. Joe showed so much last week against Peaburg that this is a team that right now is ready to ascend and really become better as the year goes on. Because again, with the addition of Edwards and Willett, not only to the defense, but Michael Willett running the ball last week. These are additions that St. Joe's didn't have, and I think those are worrisome things for St. Thomas to deal with. St. Thomas can do something because they are still a talented team, but St. Joe's, wow, they showed me just so much poise and so much ability to figure things out last week that I think St. Thomas is going to have a rough time.
Now, the other game that we had as our game of the week last week in terms of a broadcast on NJ.com was down the shore, and we bring on Joe Zadalis, who was also there with me on Friday when we saw Red Bank Catholic put together another exquisite performance in a win against Rumson Fairhaven. They exacted revenge after losing against Rumson the previous year at home, and it's the young guns on offense leading the charge, an opportunistic defense that was forcing Rumson into countless number of turnovers. And now RBC, they go from that big win down the shore and have a prime opportunity to really punch their ticket into maybe one of those top two seeds guaranteed for non-public B when they travel up north to take on Paramus Catholic this week, Joe.
Well, you talked about the young guns and the freshman tailback, the Keyport resident, Gabe Kemp, was again exemplary. 36 carries, 200 yards. I mean, Dan, you saw it, and I wrote in my story that this kid just doesn't have speed. He has thrust. He flies through holes. RBC did a nice job. They put, down block, and they would let him cut off the flow. And, he's to the second level so fast. And, I mean, what a difference this kid has made for RBC. Last year, Red Bank Catholic as a team over the course of an entire season had 1,156 yards. Kemp alone has 1,267 this year in 7 games. RBC couldn't run the ball a lick last year. Now they're one of the best in the shore. When you talked about the Paramus Catholic game this weekend, I think it's a huge measuring stick for RBC. I think RBC wants to see what it can do against one of those teams up there. And DePaul played PC, so I think RBC wants to see just how close they are to DePaul. With that running game, they're really good. They're really good. And I didn't think Ramir Rivera, the freshman quarterback, had a great game. He got drilled 3 different times. The thing, Dan, and I'll ask you your thought about it at the end of the game was I have some serious concerns about Rumson. Their issues, okay, they have 2 losses, one to Homedale and now to RBC, but 6 turnovers in those 2 losses, a bad interception. And then for whatever reason, Rumson came out in this hurry up and they would be off the field and 30, 40, a minute and a half would come off the clock and they give RBC all this time. And I think it goes beyond their starting running back, Kellen Murray, being hurt. Now they're not sure when he's back. He's got a foot injury, so I don't expect to see him again into the state tournament. But this is not the RBC team that we're used to seeing, 2 weeks out from the cutoff.
I agree, Joe. I was even saying on the broadcast at some points in the game that near the end of the first half, it was kind of curious decisions by both coaches of RBC and Rumson of clock management and trying to go maybe too fast and how aggressive do you want to go. And Rumson had their opportunities to stay within striking distance in that game. And then I think sometimes by going too fast and trying to get to the line of scrimmage, it broke off their balance in the game. And then it led to those rush decisions of throwing to the goal line when you still had a couple more downs to go and leading to turnovers. So while we've seen Rumson be in the thick of the state championship push and playing in finals, being as runners up and then eventually the state champion a year ago, it's kind of interesting to see that they're making more mistakes. I know they might have a younger crew, but Joe, even a Ryder Izzo, who is a very capable running back who set the single game rushing record in relief of Kellen Murray this season. It's kind of almost like you have to know your personnel. And I'm not saying that I know Rumson's personnel more than their coaches, but I was kind of surprised, like you, that they would go so fast against RBC and they kind of gifted possessions to the Caseys at the end of the half. And Red Bank Catholic cashed in on all of those mistakes.
I agree with you there, Dan. And I think the other thing that we're seeing, number one, Rumson is banged up. Rumson prefers to be a 2-platoon team. They had a couple of kids who had to go both ways. But again, their quarterback play has not been good. They can't throw the ball down the field. And then I thought their tackling was pretty poor. How many times did Kemp break through an arm tackle at the second level and get into the secondary? So, I think Red Bank Catholic has proven themselves to be the bully of the Shore Conference, and they're really good. But, I think we've gotten so accustomed to Rumson making this postseason run, and maybe they will. And Jeremy Schulte, the head coach at Rumson, make no bones about it. He goes, I could care less what happens in the regular season. I could care less about division titles. We want to win state championships, but, I don't know if that's a possibility, and too, especially with Camden looming in there in this great defense they have.
And it'll be interesting because now Rumson Fairhaven has to go against a Toms River North team that's starting to percolate after they've now won 2 games in a row. And another team that you have to watch out for, and this might even be a factor not only down the shore, but for state playoff purposes, Donovan Catholic, Joe. They've started to really play their best type of football. They've won 3 in a row. They got out wins. They're getting healthy at the right time. And that's somebody that we were kind of talking about off the air before the start of this podcast. That's not somebody that Red Bank Catholic would necessarily want to have a matchup against on their side of the bracket leading up to a potential run to a state final.
As I wrote last week, Donovan Catholic, I guess over the first 3-4 weeks of the season, might have been the most disappointing team in the Shore Conference. And they have started to put things together. As you said, they have 3 wins in a row, 2 of them with a freshman quarterback. And this is a defense that held Burke Memorial, I think the most explosive team in the Shore Conference, to 14 points 2 weeks ago. So they are starting to play better. They got their quarterback back, the Davis boy, who's the transfer from Seton Hall Prep. I think he's going to make a difference. I think they're starting to come together as a team. They had a lot of kids from a lot of different places. They're running the ball a little bit. They're really playing tremendous defense, and I think they're going to be a problem. And you mentioned Tom's River North. Quietly, they've won 2 in a row. I don't think they will make any kind of run at a state state championship or even a sectional championship, but it's nice to see them, put together a couple wins. But I cannot agree with you more that Donovan Catholic is going to be a troublesome opponent for some teams in non-public B.
So that's a look at both the Big Central and the Shore conferences from this past week, courtesy of our guys. Now it's time for our weekly segment where we have an interview, and this time it was our own Kevin Minnick who had an opportunity to talk with Mike Schatzman of Washington Township after his team's win against Rancocas Valley. So enjoy our weekly sit-down interview here this week with Mike Schatzman of Washington Township.
All right, we'd like to welcome Washington Township head coach Mike Schatzman to the podcast. Mike, how's it going today?
Great. Everything's great. How you guys doing?
We're doing well. We're doing well. Listen, you got let's get this out of the way beginning. People know I'm a Township guy. I went to Township. I've known you for a long time. That should not matter because I think we both know I am brutally honest with you, maybe more than anybody else because of this relationship that, I don't sugarcoat things and I'll tell you the way it is. And if you like it, you do. And if you don't, then, so be it. Are we on the same page with that?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I've been critical of you too at times. You know that.
All right. I can live with that. Listen, let's just give people some background real fast. You're a Township guy. You graduated from there, played there. You're in your 8th season now. The team is 7-0, off to its best start since 2001. I had to go back and dig that up. I was able to do that. Second ranked public school in the state behind Winslow, number 7 in the state rankings this week. In your 8th season, you're 45-30, and you started out 3-7 back-to-back years to kind of get things going. I guess that was even maybe a little bit of an adjustment period. 2-2 in COVID, we kind of throw that out the window. Since then, 6-3, 5-5, 9-3, 10-3 last year, first sectional title in a while, knocked off AC. And then now you're looking at 7-0 right now. Tell me, what is it about this team you think, at least right now, that has allowed you to enjoy this kind of success?
Yeah, I think for us this year, it's really it's a heavy senior class, a lot of experience, a lot of guys that have played not only as juniors but also played as sophomores, which at the Group 5 level, the experience aspect, getting that experience under your belt and having success like we have over the last couple of years is just, it's a great opportunity for us to continue to get better, continue to make progress. I also think having the success over the last couple of years has given those kids a lot of confidence. They're not really accustomed to losing from their time in youth football to the freshman level, junior varsity level, if they played there, to now the varsity level. So they're accustomed to winning. They're a competitive group. And I think it helps when at this level, at least, that you have kids that are obviously talented, but also bring that experience and that sense of, consistency on a year-to-year basis. I think that's what's kind of started us in the right direction this year through the first 7 games.
All right, so senior heavy team, tremendous depth, but these kids as sophomores, maybe not necessarily all of them seeing a significant amount of playing time, but as sophomores, they get a taste of that championship game. Now, Toms River North knocks you off in that game in 2023. We all know what Toms River North was like the last 3 or 4 years. Pretty much unbeatable across the board. But you get a taste of that. And then last year, you come in, you win a sectional title, you still have that Toms River North mountain in front of you. What maybe do you think off of last year? What did these kids finally learn going into their senior year now that you think has helped them? Having to face Toms River North these last 2 seasons, what do you think they kind of took away from that maybe has helped them, I don't know, maybe succeed in big games, maybe allow that the moment not to be too much, the lights aren't too bright, something along those lines. What's it kind of been like this, taking away from last year to where you're at right now?
Yeah, I think that's a critical point, is playing in those big game atmospheres, and we've tried to do that even when I first took over the job in 2018. I think we had a signature win in each of those years, even though we weren't as successful throughout the course of the season. My first year we beat Hamilton, who was a really good program. We beat them in a really tough matchup, so the kids kind of saw, okay, we're not at the point where we want to be, obviously, but there's a significant win there. The next year, we ended up playing, I think, out of our 10 games that year, I think 7 of the teams were either in a sectional final or won a sectional championship. So we got a chance to experience those games, even as a program that would, in reality, probably should have got a little bit of relief. We didn't really necessarily get that, which in turn is not a bad thing. I think now that we look at it, as we go into, the last couple of years here, playing in the big games against your Winslows, your Shawnees, your Kingsways, teams that are traditionally at the top of their group, or, in a conversation for a sectional championship, and having that experience and having some success against those teams over the last couple of years. I think it allows our kids to really believe that, hey, what we got going on is working. We're moving in that direction. Playing teams like Toms River North, we played them in 2022 as well, at the Battle of the Beach in the first game of the season. Because we want to play those types of games, because we know that if we want to get to where we want to get, those are the teams that you're going to have to compete against and eventually have to try to beat. So, teams like RV, Winslow, Shawnee, Holy Spirit, we've played over the last couple of years, Kingsway, those teams again are preparing us for, the Group 5 playoff picture and beyond. So, yeah, I think it gives our kids a little bit of sense of like, hey, we're not afraid to play those teams. We want to match up against teams. We're going to seek out teams that we know are going to be in the conversation of playoff or championship contenders, and we want to see how we match up with them. So, I think that's a huge sense of confidence there. And in pressure situations, our kids kind of are, I don't want to say next play mentality, but they just kind of let things roll, because they're confident in themselves and confident in the group that, hey, we'll make a switch, or we'll make an adjustment, and we'll bounce back, because we're capable of doing that.
All right. I mean, that's a great answer, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, listen, tell me what you like about this group. Obviously you've been around these kids for a long time, and I'm guessing you've probably known these kids for even longer than the years that they've been in the high school. Tell me a little about what you liked about this team.
Yeah, I think they have a sense of passion and pride. I think in 2018, when I first got hired, the big thing for me was building that relationship with our youth organization. I played in it, so I was familiar with, obviously, the coaching staff and the program itself. So making myself visible, building a relationship with those kids, visiting the middle schools, getting a chance to see the kids at their banquets, having a middle school weight room program after school for kids to come into high school and work out after the high school guys were done, and continuing to build that relationship with them, and getting a chance to know them. So, yeah, realistically, I've known these guys, since they were, 7, 8 years old, which again, I think goes to show the trust that they have in me, and then really the trust I have in them. And they all have different personalities, which makes it unique. There's some quiet, reserved ones, and there's some guys that are passionate and like to talk and do their thing. So it's definitely a mix of different personalities, which I think any football program will probably tell you, that's what you're going to get, is you're going to get a group that's, a little bit different and unique, but in reality, it's, we all have the same goal in mind. So I think that really helped, building those relationships with those guys as they approach the high school. And, giving them an opportunity to come out on Friday nights and see our guys in action and be a part of the environment that we have at Township, which I think is one of the better environments in South Jersey. So, to give them a chance to see that and want them to want to come here, I think is the big thing. We want kids that want to come here, want to play here, want to go to school here. So I think, we've done that over the last couple of years and in turn has led to some success.
You mentioned wanting to come here. Dude, I walk the sidelines
Yeah.
and you're a Group 5 school and you've got some depth. You've got some serious numbers of kids that are probably talented enough to see the field if they were somewhere else, but they're kind of like, I guess, to the point where they kind of have to maybe wait their turn. Talk a little bit about the depth that you do have. Not many guys go two ways for you guys, and you wrote, your stats are not overly like glowing. I mean, I counted up the other day. You've had 16 different kids carry the football. Your leading rusher doesn't even have 600 yards through 7 games. Yet you're 7-0. So tell me a little bit about the depth and how you're able to maybe get, I don't know, 25 kids on both sides of the ball on the field in any particular game.
Yeah, I think obviously Washington Township's known for having a bigger program and a lot of numbers. So we flirt around that 140 kids in the program number, which is probably one of the higher ones in New Jersey. But I think the most difficult part of my job is, we have so much talent and so much depth that you try to throw guys in there and get guys opportunities, whether it's at running back, receiver. Our O-line's pretty much solidified with 5 guys, and we have a 6th guy who kind of works his way in there as well, because, it's hard to have all 5 linemen, throughout the course of the season. So we're constantly trying to build that, that next group. And, to be honest, yeah, we don't really call it a second unit. It's really a 1 and 1A because we feel so confident in the guys that are behind the guys that are starting, or even the guys that are starters. They know there might be a time that, hey, they start the game, but they might not see as many plays as the guy that comes in for them or the next guy that comes in for them. So, we've been in situations this year where we've had a comfortable lead, going into halftime or going into the fourth quarter. And we wanted to give those guys an opportunity and the experience to play against varsity competition, to not only see what they can do now, but, what can they do next year? Because we're obviously losing a lot of guys going into the 26 season. So giving those kids some valuable experience. And, I look at it on a practice standpoint, our scout units, they're not guys just lining up and, being bags. They're guys that are good players that are competing against guys that we want to see. So I think it's important for especially the younger kids to see that. And I think you're right. I think they see the success that this current group's having. And one, they want to be a part of that. And 2, I think there's a sense of like pride that they can kind of do the same thing. So, that's obviously the hope, going forward into the future years. But it's definitely a interesting part of my job this year is trying to get everybody some opportunities and in different spots. And the kids have taken a selfless approach to it because they know, the next guy that comes in might be just as good, if not better than me at certain points. So I think that helps us, in hopes that we get to a situation where we're deep into the playoffs and you're in game 12, 13, 14. It's a long season. And maybe our guys are a little bit fresher than the guy that, carried the ball 300 times this year. Maybe our guy has 150 carries, which makes things a little bit more unique and dynamic for us on both sides of the ball.
Hey, listen, we're getting close to the end here. Let's touch on last week a little bit. RV, a Group 5 school, one that I think is going to be in the mix come the tournament, come the playoffs. You go up to their place, and you had mentioned it after the game, and I told you first off, I thought it was the most thorough and complete performance of any team I had seen this year. How big of a game was that for you guys? I know you're sitting at number one in Group 5 in the power rankings. You'd love to never have to leave home in the postseason. That would be fantastic. But uh, tell me a little bit about that RV game. And what you felt like. You're with the performance and coming out of that. Where you think your next step is to kind of keep this momentum going.
Yeah, I think RV is obviously again traditionally been a very good opponent. They had our number last year, shut us out at our place. They had a tremendous team. Our coaching staffs are very familiar with each other. Coach Lucas, Coach Wallace, Haverstick, Dan Harris. We all kind of have a connection with each other. Ironically, we went to Coach Delano at Haddonfield and Coach Shiva run a camp in the summer. So we were both in kind of building mode when Garrett took over at RV. So we both ended up going to Haddonfield camp together and doing that for 2 years and getting a chance to compete against each other. Which it's funny now because I guess you can consider it more like a Group 5 type rivalry type thing. Where again we know each other so well, and our kids know each other well just from the youth program. They have a really good youth organization as well, so our kids are always matched up with them. So yeah, I mean, I think for us it was. I don't want to say another game because I'd be lying if I said that. I think for us there was definitely a little extra motivation based on what they did to us last year. The whole mindset of the Group 5 rankings and we want to try to stay at home. We finished our last 2 regular season games at home, Kingsway and Timber Creek, and then there's an opportunity for us to, if we want to get to where we want to go, we can have potentially 6 home games in a row, which would be really nice to not get on a bus again for a while. But yeah, I mean, I think our kids are mature and experienced enough to know hey, this is a big game. I think there's conversation throughout the week about that. This week is kind of the same thing. Kingsway's 6-1, and they've had our number over the last 10 years. So we're going to kind of it's short lived, I guess you can say, but definitely satisfying to see our guys come out and play that way, to play the way they did on Friday night, and have a complete game and take over the game at certain points, and I think that was huge for us to kind of prove that we can do that against not only teams that we've had, throughout the course of the season, but teams like RV who are, again, going to be Group 5 contenders in November.
All right, Mike. Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on the show this week. We had to give some South Jersey some love. We've been touching on these North Jersey guys. I told my guys we got to give South Jersey some love this week. You guys are a perfect team to kind of talk about here at 7-0. And, best of luck to you the rest of the season.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So we thank Coach Schatzman of Washington Township for joining us, and we thank Kevin Minnick for conducting that interview after another big win there for Washington Township down in South Jersey. So now it's time, guys, for our weekly Top 20 Roundtable as we discuss some of the ins and outs of your ranking system. And one of the teams that we're going to start off with, Ryan, Ramapo. Again, I have to say it over and over again. You would think that, okay, Dan is now going to be the spokesperson for this Raider program, but I think that this is the least talked about team that could be a legitimate state championship contender. Their only loss was to Old Tappan, and they just can get up and down the field. They have an explosive offense, a great defense, and they just made mincemeat out of a Wayne Valley team that was riding high after that emotional victory against crosstown rival in Wayne Hills. What about this Ramapo team, and are they the team to beat possibly in the North in Group 4?
Well, Dan, I'm not sure the folks on Oradell Avenue would appreciate you being the spokesman for Ramapo, but yeah, this was a dominant win for Ramapo, and it was good enough for them to leapfrog a few teams here into the top 10, including Northern Highlands, and I think it's the right move. Their only loss was to Old Tappan, and it was on the final play. That was back in week 3, and remember, Northern Highlands beat Wayne Valley by 8 points. Ramapo beat them by 35 on Friday, and I saw it with my own 2 eyes. It was a dominant win, a really dominant win. And Bryce Flower didn't play for Wayne Valley, and he's a big piece for them. But as good as he is, he probably wasn't making a difference here with how lopsided it was. And we all know about the passing game for Ramapo. Casey Grusser, his supporting cast, seniors, Sal Lavoti, Mike Ballin, and Joey Yessis. And all those guys have a lot of experience. They're really talented. But how about the ground game? Again, 239 yards, 34 carries. Grusser over 100 yards again. Liam Hayward, Gino Georgia, the senior running backs, pushing piles, moving the chains again. And this is a really, really complete team. And we're seeing them defend at a really high level. That Wayne Valley offense coming in was averaging over 30 a game. And Passaic Tech was averaging over 30 a game going into the game 2 weeks ago against Ramapo. And Ramapo won both games in lopsided fashion, running clock. So, like I said, really complete team. I'm really, really impressed with what Ramapo's doing in all three phases. And in a couple weeks here, 2 weeks, we're going to find out head-to-head who's better, them or Northern Highlands. And that game's not only going to decide the division, but it's also going to potentially decide home field advantage throughout the playoffs in North 4, depending on where Phillipsburg falls. So Wayne Valley on the other side of the coin, they're out, but they got Mount Olive this week, top 20 team, and with a win there, they can all of a sudden creep right back into the combo.
Got to give some love to Ramapo now that I live a couple blocks down from the schools. So, got to help the Raiders out there. And Donovan, West Morris was a team that was in our rankings earlier this season. They actually didn't lose, but then they dropped out. Well, they're back in.
Yeah, I mean, you can't ignore the record, 7-0, 7-0. And I think West Morris was in a situation at the start of the season where this is a program, Kevin Henley has done a great job of building this program into a title contender year in and year out. And they have such a great piece on the O-line and in the D-line with Tom Borgia that they are going to be competitive no matter who the opponent is, right? But this was a team, like looking at their schedule, they were probably going to have to get off to a really good start to get into the rankings. And they did do that. They're 3-0 heading into that Warren Hills game a couple weeks ago on September 19th. And that was the game that, they won 28-27, but they were kind of lucky to get out of it with a win. Given, Warren Hills, there was something happened on that last drive, but Warren Hills should have won that game. And that was the game where we dropped West Morris out because that was not, it wasn't really a great look. You only win 28-27, kind of pretty lucky win. What's going to happen in the few weeks afterwards? We can't just, keep vaulting you up after, quite honestly, kind of like a poor win where they could have won by more. And then in response to that, 35-0 over Randolph, 44-7 over Parsippany Hills, and then 38-24 over Montville. And Randolph and Parsippany Hills are having rough years. Those scores aren't really a surprise to me, and I don't think they're a surprise to anybody else here. But that Montville game kind of had, it kind of had the shape of that Warren Hills game a little bit. Montville's a little bit better than that 3-3 record indicates. They can throw the ball really well. The last team that West Morris faced that actually was a threat in the past game was Warren Hills. Jackson Gearing's a really good quarterback for Montville. And what ends up happening is it's a tight game, through the first half. West Morris is only up 15-10. And there's that potential for Montville to kind of just keep hanging around like Warren Hills did a couple weeks ago. But then West Morris just ended the game and they end up winning 38-24, scored 3 touchdowns to Montville's 2 in the second half, and they were up 31-17 at one point. So I think West Morris has proven to us over the last few weeks that they are definitely capable of being a top 20 team, and they've done a really good job of showing us that they can handle their business after the indication that they might not have against Warren Hills.
So that's a look at some of the notable movers in our top 20. Now, guys, it's time to talk a bit about the games that are exciting you for this Week 7 slate. And Ryan, starting off, what are a couple of the matchups in the Super Football Conference that stand out in your mind that could be really big when it comes playoff time?
Yeah, Dan, we teased the NJIC playoffs, but there's a lot in the SFC this weekend, a really busy week. Joe also mentioned the PC game, RBC going up to Paramus. But to me, I mean, this game, at Caven Point on Friday, you have DePaul going there, and it's kind of a gut check game for both teams. Both teams, the winner's going to feel really good. The loser, not as much. And to me, Dan, this game's going to be all about how St. Peter's defends. And you're not going to find a tougher quarterback to defend than Derek Zammit. 4-star prospect, Washington commit. He could do anything with his arm, anything with his legs. And St. Peter's has struggled with keeping DePaul's offense in check here in the past couple of years. And they don't have to worry about Nolan James, Elijah Burris, and Deji Jones in this game. But this is still a really tough DePaul team to defend. You have Mason James for DePaul playing really well this year. He's the top pass catcher. He's emerged as the top guy for Derek Zammit. And I believe in this St. Peter's offense a lot. I do. I mean, I've seen a lot from them. Tyler Bell, great dual threat quarterback. He got the two running backs, Barksdale and Teray, a really good receiving core, a really good offensive line. But this is going to be a really, really big test here for this St. Peter's defense. And they got to put together their best performance of the season to get to 7-0. We're going to have Jason Bernstein there to cover. It's going to be an awesome game. I'm going to be at Old Tappan for Wayne Hills at NVOT. And I spoke on how St. Peter's has to bottle up Zammit. Wayne Hills is going to have to bottle up Shane Small. And Small has games where the flow of the game just kind of doesn't go his way and he doesn't get all that involved. But in week 3 against Ramapo, he had 4 touchdowns. And there's times where he's called upon to have a big day, and he has big days. And he can do that here if he finds, a couple creases in the Wayne Hills defense. And Coach Demikov's going to have to put together a good game plan to defend him. I'm curious to see what he does. Do you bracket him? Do you throw some zone blitzes and just try to speed up Zach Maselli's process? I'm curious to see what he does. And remember, Coach Demikov coached under Chris Olson, and he was kind of the brains of that team. Like, he was the coordinator that put together the great game plans that won them championships. And that's what Joe Klaus does right now for Old Tappan. And you're going to see right now, what kind of game plan is Coach Demikov going to put together? I think he can put something good together. I think the running backs, the linebackers, the DBs and the wide receivers, they all match up pretty evenly. I look at, Zakarski and I look at Radoian, and those are 2 pretty similar running backs. There's a lot of similarities, but Wayne Hills doesn't have a Shane Small, and he's that matchup nightmare. And Wayne Hills is going to have to find a way to defend him. If they can defend him, I think they can win this game. But Old Tappan right now, Dan, we talked about it every week. They just keep winning, and they're going to be my pick. It's going to be a really fun game.
Donovan, what are some of the games that you're looking most forward to here in week 7?
Yeah, as Ryan alluded to, there's a ton of action in the SFC this week. And the big game that I'm looking for is number 19 Mount Olive going to be going up against Wayne Valley. And simply put, is Wayne Valley going to be able to bounce back? You know what I mean? Like, they're riding such a big high after that Wayne Hills win, and then they go on the road, and then they go on the road against Ramapo and just get stomped 42-7. And they did not do a great job against the run in that game. And Mount Olive's calling card this year, I've seen it, you've seen it, Dan, has been the run game. Braden Longo has been so incredible in the run game this year. He ran for 233 yards on 16 attempts and had 5 touchdowns against Vernon. Now, do I think that Wayne Valley is a tougher opponent than Vernon? Absolutely. But no one's really been able to stop Longo this year. So, simply put, for that game, I'm kind of just watching to see if Wayne Valley can bounce back. They did a really good job of bouncing back after that Northern Highlands loss earlier in the year, go on to win 4 in a row. And can they do that against Mount Olive and then Ridgewood to end the season? And then the next game I'm looking at is the Fulton Bowl. Hanover Park versus West Essex at West Essex Friday night, 6:30. This is a big game, kind of a smaller school game. Hanover Park is 7-0 though this year with new head coach Nick Liberato, and Dan Fulton is over at West Essex now, and he's got them playing pretty well, 4-2. They've won 4 straight games, and both teams are ranked pretty high in their respective standings. West Essex in North 3 is currently the number 4 team, and then Hanover Park in North 2 is currently the number 5 team, and it will win against for either team in this game kind of vault them a little bit more forward in those standings.
All right, so a couple of big matchups there in the Super Football Conference that we're going to be looking forward to in Week 7. And Joe Zadalis, there's a plethora of great opportunities to see some quality football games down the shore. What are the ones that are catching your eye here for Week 7?
Well, Dan, the biggest one, in my opinion, is the game that sends Brick Memorial down to Manahawkin to play 7-0 Southern. My colleagues will tell you that I pretty much have to be quiet on Sunday mornings when we do the top 20 because, in my opinion, the Shore simply hasn't had any other teams belong in except for RBC. But I do believe the winner of this game will be of top 20 quality. It's a really interesting game. I'm calling it the Aesop's Fable game. It's the tortoise and the hare. Brick Memorial is the hare. The most explosive team in the Shore Conference. We've talked about their quarterback, Jason LaQuara. Brick Memorial with LaQuara at the helm is a chunk play machine. Over the last 2 seasons, he has 174 completions, resulting in over 3,300 yards. His passing numbers are all up this year. completion percentage is up. Touchdown per games is up. This season, he has thrown a TD pass every 4.75 completions. Can you believe that? So literally every 5 passes he throws results in a touchdown. They're going to want to go fast. They're going to be the team that has the opportunity to make big plays down the field and in the run. And then there's Southern. Slower, slowest. That's Southern. A team that has allowed only 35 points in 7 games. And by the way, Southern is 7-0 for the first time since the school in the existence of their program, and Southern opened in 1957. So Southern's going to do things a little different. They're going to try and establish the run. They're going to try and play keep away with the football. They want to take time off the clock. Their passing game is improved week by week. I think it's going to be a great football game. I think it's going to be highly strategic. I don't know if Southern can stop them, but if they can slow them down enough, Southern is very capable here. And remember, Donovan has that crazy loss to Donovan Catholic, 15-14, which to me is kind of unexplainable given the way they can score points. So I think it's going to be a great football game in Manahawkin on Friday night.
And Mike Kinney, you're looking at a great rivalry matchup in Essex County that can really steal some headlines in Week 7 action.
Yeah, Dan. This is the Oranges Bowl. That's what it is. It's East Orange against West Orange. They're the best two public school teams within the Oranges, over Columbia's in South Orange and then Orange High School. And anybody who doesn't realize the significance of winning that game is not from the Oranges and can appreciate it. I grew up in East Orange, and my grandfather and my dad grew up in Orange, and they go back to my great-grandfather came from West Jersey to settle in Orange in 1890, and they grew up in Orange. Well, my grandfather lived with us in East Orange for like the last 5 or 6 years of his life. And for the last 5 and 6 years of his life, he couldn't stop reminding us, even though he was living in East Orange, how much better Orange was than East Orange, because that's how it is over there. It's that kind of rivalry. And last year, they were two great games between East Orange and West Orange. West Orange pulled out a 7-0 win with a fourth quarter touchdown in the regular season game. And then East Orange came back in the North 1 Group 5 final and beat West Orange 13-7, 2 touchdown catches by Alex Hanks, who's still a member of the East Orange football team. So that's somebody that West Orange is going to have to deal with. And this is a huge game, not only because of that the Orange's Bowl, borderline thing, Essex County thing, but West Orange is number 2 right now in the North Group 5 seedings, and East Orange is 4. So this is a huge PowerPoint game for both teams. They want the home game. East Orange was able to beat West Orange last year at West Orange in the playoff game, but East Orange wants to be home, or West Orange wants to be home if they happen to meet up again in the playoffs. So this is huge for that. East Orange is obviously undefeated. That's something West Orange is going to be after to stop that. They'd love to be the team that stops that. And I would say right now, West Orange has played a tougher overall schedule than East Orange, even though they're in the same division. This is also a divisional game. Even though they're in the same division, West Orange went out and in independent games or cross-conference games, however you want to call it, they played Shabazz first game of the season, and they lost on a field goal with 7 seconds left. That was no disgrace. Shabazz, as we've seen, is having a great year. And they lost to Phillipsburg 2 weeks ago by 3 points. A game down at Maloney Stadium in Phillipsburg, which is a tough place to play. Almost pulled that game off with a big second half. So West Orange has played the tougher schedule. And if you look at it, East Orange last week barely beat Patterson Eastside, a team with only 1 win. However, if you look at the comparable scores between the two teams in their divisional games, you see that East Orange really brings its defense in most games. Their first 4 games were shutouts, and up until last week's game, which I think is a hiccup for East Orange, they'd only allowed 6 points in their first 5 games. So East Orange defense is going to be something that West Orange is going to have to deal with. But West Orange is also a team that's so athletic defensively that East Orange is going to have to deal with Sidney Padilla on the edge and Fahim Issa off the defensive tackle. So it's going to be a really fun game that is not going to feel like fun for 4 quarters, but I know I'm going to have fun watching it, and it's going to be an outstanding football game. I think it's a game that West Orange can pull out and maybe and maybe get itself back in the top 20. They were there early in the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if the East Orange defense, if Quadir Parrish and Abdul Kafando and those dudes step up and are able to stop West Orange with their 2 quarterbacks and with Farad Green running the ball. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
And Kevin, for you, a Week 7 matchup that has a matchup featuring 2 ranked teams is going to be the one to watch in South Jersey.
Yeah, Dan, there's a couple big games down here this weekend, and primarily division games. On Saturday, West Deptford plays Paulsboro, and if Paulsboro wins that game, they'll win their Patriot Division title. And if West Deptford wins, they still have a chance to clinch a title as well. But the big game is Washington Township hosting Kingsway. That's a West Jersey Classic Division game. The winner of that will obviously have the step up in the route to the division championship. Kingsway at number 17, 6-1, playing extremely well with their only loss being to Camden. And then we've talked about Washington Township with Mike Schatzman earlier in the show. And, Minutemen 7-0, number 7, playing some of the best football that school has had in a long, long time. So Townships won the last 2 games rather convincingly. 35-20 last year, 52-23 the year before. And it's homecoming at Washington Township, which means that place is going to be an absolute mob scene. There's probably going to be, I would estimate, anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000, maybe even more there. It'll be packed. A lot of pregame festivities that everybody will be hanging around to watch this matchup, and it should be a good one. You got 2 good quarterbacks, and David Orovets for Kingsway and Cole Aquino for Washington Township. Both teams have played a pretty decent schedule. Both teams have scored a lot of points while also playing some very, very good defense. So, like I said, this is a big game. They're both in South 5. So, playoff projections will be affected by this as well. And like I said, the winner will get to have their leg up in the chase for the division championship. So this should be a real good game from start to finish.
So that's a look at some of the games of note in the upcoming Week 7 already of this 2025 New Jersey high school football season. A reminder, fans, that you could watch 2 of our broadcast covered games this week, as we'll have a couple of good ones. Summit at Wood-Ridge on Friday. 2 teams with combined 12 wins on the season. That's going to be a 6 p.m. kickoff. And then on Saturday, we get a look at St. Joe's. How will the Green Knights bounce back after that overtime defeat a week ago, as they're going to be playing host to Pope John? Kickoff for 1 p.m. on Saturday. And a reminder, fans, that from the opening kickoff to the end of the season, NJ.com's award-winning staff of reporters and photojournalists put you in the middle of the action for in-depth coverage of these games all around New Jersey, including photo galleries, recaps, and stats. Be sure to visit NJ.com/HSSports. So that'll do it for another episode here of the Jersey Blitz. I'd like to thank my compatriots Donovan Hugel, Ryan Patty, Kevin Minnick, Mike Kinney, and Joe Zadalis for joining us. And of course, we thank our producer, David Liss, for all of his help. So we look forward to talking about all of the Week 7 action next week here on the Jersey Blitz. Take care, everybody.